Well, I've been working as part of the floor trial that we've been holding in Bath Abbey this summer, and this has been a project to lift a trial area of the floor so that we can test some methods for repairing it and doing some of the work that we need to do to stabilise it. But as part of this, I organised in July a recording project working with volunteers to record all the inscriptions on the Ledgerstones that were uncovered for the first time in 150 years when the pews came up. We had 30 volunteers, a mixture of people from the Abbey congregation and some people from the city and some people from NADFAS, which is a local fine arts and decorative group. And they were a very enthusiastic band that had 3 days to record these stones before they were temporarily lifted for the work to be done.
If the money is forthcoming, this is likely to be repeated and repeated across the whole floor of the Abbey. Do I take it then that you would have this immense undertaking of recording every stone that's lifted?
We would indeed. It's very, very important for this work that every stone in the floor is recorded before it's removed, and that means we have to record the inscription, the size of it, the condition that it's in, the material that it's made of, and they all have to be photographed. So it is an undertaking, but the great thing about doing the trial was that we now have this band of 30 volunteers who've been trained by the church's Conservation Trust, who helped us with the project, and they're all local and they're all very keen to start working on the rest of the floor in due course.
I mean, with the greatest of respect to the dead, this is in many ways bringing the past back to life. I mean, we are talking about real people who have lived and died in this city, not all of them famous.
That's exactly why I'm so passionate about this particular part of the project. When people say to me, these are just stones, why are they so important? The reason they're so important is because they represent real people who lived in the parish of Bath Abbey. They worked there, they were baptised and married in the Abbey, and many of them were buried there. And what I'm really, really passionate about revealing are the stories about the lives of these many ordinary shopkeepers and craftsmen and artisan who lived in this area around the Abbey.
What can you get from names and dates?
Well, when we have a name and a date, we can look back at the burial registers that we've got, and then we might get an address or an occupation of that person, and then we can start doing a little bit more work amongst archives that we hold or archives in the record office or the library to tease out some of the stories. Not everybody who has a stone there has an exciting story to tell, but a lot of them do.
Are there any exciting stories you've come across as yet?
We haven't done enough research on the stones in the trial area yet. We were very, very pleased to find the Ledgerstone for Malthus, the well-known economist, because he has a wall stone, but we haven't been able to see his Ledgerstone before. So we were very pleased to be able to make that link. There was a nice stone which I really liked because it was very simple, and it was to a young girl called Elizabeth, and it just said, "of this parish," and no other details about her. So I have some volunteers who are going to be researching that one to see what we can find out about her.
Is there any sort of hope in your heart of finding lost people as this work progresses? I mean, I was always told with Bonash, the only so-called pauper to be buried under the floor of Bath Abbey, that because the Victorians took up the stones and didn't bother putting them back in the same order, that his actual resting place was lost. I mean, is that sort of thing likely to come to light?
Unfortunately, I don't think that is very likely. We do know that by the end of the 1830s, at that time the burials were being disturbed a lot because it was so difficult to find space to bury people. And then when Gilbert Scott did his work, he further disturbed the top layer of burials. So that layer is already disturbed, and we are not going to go any further than that. So I think the likelihood of being able to establish a precise spot of where somebody was buried is sadly slim.
Can I ask you ultimately what you hope will come out of this recording of Ledgerstones? What would you like to see them used for? Well, what is your sort of ideal way of dealing with them?
In terms of the Ledgerstones and the floor in the Abbey, I think the ideal way is for them to go back as far as possible to create a beautiful, authentic floor that adds to the atmosphere of the Abbey. Obviously, a lot of them are damaged and cracked, and we may not be able to put all of them back, but we are hoping that a substantial and beautiful and smooth and level floor can be created from the Ledgerstones that we've got.
And is there a book? It sounds like there's several PhDs in there somewhere in terms of research.
Well, there may well be, in terms of research, some academic publications or books that we can get out of this. Actually, what I'm much more interested in is going back to those stories of the real lives and real people, is using those as we develop the storytelling and interpretation that we want to put in place for visitors in the future years as part of the Footprint project. And if we can use those stories to tell all the visitors who come into the Abbey during the course of the year about some of the people who worshipped and used this church in previous years, then I'd be very happy.